Yeah, I think you get a huge bang for your buck with calories, carbs, and caffeine. And then at that point too, if we're looking to kind of move the needle just that little bit more, then I think that's where some of these things come in.
This week on the Yoakum Strength podcast, we sit down with Coach Adam Ross. Coach Ross is a registered dietitian, sports nutritionist, and former professional hockey player. Throughout the episode, he talks about simplifying nutrition for athletes and Gen Pop alike, supplements that are over and underrated, and we even talk about the use of GLP-1s. If you like diving into potential ways to improve your health and performance with nutrition, this is an episode for you. As always, thank you for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to tell you about the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Insider is our online training platform that takes everything we talk about on this podcast, better movement, smarter training, and actually enjoying the process, and turns it into something you can live and breathe. Our goal is simple: create better movers who feel stronger, more capable, and more confident in their bodies. We do that through a holistic approach that includes everything from sprinting and lifting to mobility and spinal movements. Inside the Insider, we run several distinct programs: Building Better Movers for foundational athletic development, a dedicated Olympic lifting program, the Get Yoked series for pushing strength and physique, and Washed Up Movers for lifters who want to keep training hard without beating themselves into the ground. We also offer focused options like a vertical jump program and at-home training, so you're never forced into a one-size-fits-all plan. You're not just getting a program, you're getting full access to our app with video demos, progress tracking, a community Discord, and direct communication with a Yoakum Strength coach, plus our 30-page nutrition and lifestyle guideline covering how we eat, train, and build habits with our athletes. If you want to make training fun again, use code podcast25 at checkout for 25% off your first program. Hope to see you there. All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You are one of our, I don't want to say first nutrition because I think we had one or two, but like they were more like strength conditioning and like had some nutrition on the side type thing. But you might be our first full-time nutrition deep dive here. So I'm excited for this one.
Excellent. Yeah, happy to do it. Hopefully you found your right guy.
Yeah, it opens up the portal into that world. But I'm always interested, like, how did you get started in this like journey? Was this a like you got an eye-opening moment of like realizing what you're consuming and being like, shit, dude, I got to change this? You weren't feeling good? Was it just like you went to school and like this is super powerful? It's like a feel like how did you get started in this field and taking it to where you've taken it?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, athletics, honestly. Yeah, it was for me. It was performance. So, just to give you guys a quick little backstory, born and raised in Western Canada, a smaller town called Red Deer, Alberta. I always joke it's like you get two options growing up in Red Deer: you play hockey or you start doing drugs. So, I went the hockey route, luckily, and I was lucky enough to get a Division I scholarship. I moved out to Massachusetts, United States. Started playing hockey, and that's really kind of where things progress. So, once you get to that like Division I level, everybody's strong, everybody's fast, everybody's good. I had a terrible freshman year. I just wasn't really happy with how things went. And I was kind of looking for that competitive advantage. And, I kind of made a commitment to myself after my freshman year, actually in the middle of my freshman year, that, coming back next season, I'm gonna be better prepared. I'm gonna do this right. So I got really hard into the gym, and not that I hadn't been in the past. I was always a guy that enjoyed the gym and enjoyed the fitness aspect of athletics, but I was just looking for that something different, right? That edge. So I started to improve my diet. And to be totally honest with you, it was total bro science. It was like I figured eating dietary fat would make me fat. So I kind of stopped eating, cheese and, I stopped drinking hot chocolates at coffee breaks at work and whatever. And, started paying closer attention to my protein and my vegetable intake and stuff. And I made this rapid transformation in like 3 months where like I was hard in the gym as well, but man, total body composition change, energy was way better. I just felt so much better. I felt outstanding. And that was kind of the gateway into it. So, fast forward, I ended up, playing 3 more years of college, just keep going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. I ended up playing professional hockey for a couple of years after that. And all the way through, nutrition and fitness and training and that type of thing was kind of at the forefront to the point where literally by the end of my hockey career, I was actually probably more interested in the nutrition and the fitness and everything than I was the hockey. So, fast forward a bunch of years, kind of bounced around, did some things, and decided to go back to school and become a registered dietitian. So became, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it became literally such like a passion. I mean, I always say I'm super lucky because, I got to play hockey for kind of half my life and do what I wanted to do. And then through that, I found like something that I truly love, and I turned that into a profession as well. So yeah, did the RD thing, got accredited that way, and now I've been doing that for the last 6 years basically. So it's been a lot of fun, but that's kind of how I got down the road.
What's that process of going back to school and becoming like an RD? I know that people do it and it just doesn't seem well talked about. I know there's clinicals, you go, a lot of people get internships with teams or get experience with that, but what is the actual process of becoming like a registered dietitian there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was a whole nother undergrad degree, which was brutal. I did communication degree my first time through college. Obviously, dietetics is a science-based degree. So yeah, it's a, undergrad. And then also too, you need to get accepted for a dietetic internship. So you do your 4 years undergrad, and then if your, grades are good enough or whatever, you get matched to an internship, and then that's like a 12 to 1300 hour internship. So it's essentially a year of, free work that they get off you, and then that's where you go through all of your rotations. So we do clinical, we do community, we do food service, and then obviously depending on the internship or depending on some of the tracks that people are able to choose, they may get some things with sports nutrition. I was lucky enough to get one at a local university here, St. John's University, where they have Division I athletics, so got a little bit of exposure there and stuff. But yeah, so it's just, that's kind of the process, and I don't know if it's master's is mandatory yet, but I know they're going that route. So soon it's going to be, RDs are going to need to have the master's before they get the dietetics accreditation. But I was lucky enough that, I got like a half undergrad, half a master's, and then I got accredited. So that's kind of where I stopped in terms of the, school that I'm paying for. Doesn't mean I stopped my education, but stopped paying for it as much.
What was like some of the eye-opening things from like yourself? You were talking about how when you first got into this, you were like the meathead self-education and like trying to figure things out. Then you go back to school and like you're taking it serious. Like was there any eye-openers like, dude, that was fucking stupid. What was I doing? Or maybe it was like, oh dude, I was on the right track with a lot of this stuff and I was just kind of doing what intuitively worked. Like what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I was doing it all wrong. I really was.
No.
Like, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like looking back, shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of situation, right? But I was pretty much relying on like bodybuilding nutrition articles to try to be a professional hockey player, and it just wasn't working, obviously, right? So, and I think a lot of athletes run into this today, right? It's a lot more of a restrictive, I guess, approach to nutrition as opposed to, something that should be a lot more supportive of your energy needs, right? So I kind of went down that rabbit hole of, like I said, kind of falling into some fads, really kind of avoiding dietary fats. I went, hardcore paleo for a little while, but again, didn't want to include the dietary fat. So it was basically just, vegetables, protein, and some sweet potatoes. It wasn't, was not sustaining my energy needs in any kind of a way. So, and I think so that's kind of where obviously you learn like, okay, I did a lot of things the wrong way. And as an athlete, the intentions are always the best intentions, right? My intentions were never to mess myself up or impair my performance in any kind of a way. But you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and you tend to be misguided, especially with the landscape of social media and stuff like that now, keto, low carb, carnivore diets, and athletes trying to jump on that stuff. So I went a lot of the wrong directions, and then I do think through my schooling, you learn that maybe not everything's as life and death as you think it is, and there's a lot more nuance to stuff. And then you kind of start going down rabbit holes, and you realize that a lot of the things that we stress about as athletes and stuff just don't really matter as much as the fundamentals that have been working since kind of the beginning of time. So yeah, that's kind of the road I went.
I know this is going to be super basic for you, but for like young athletes listening and with how popular social media is, could you just describe the difference between somebody who can call themselves a dietitian and a nutritionist? Because I think some people, when they see that, they don't really realize one is like a protected title and they see like a nutritionist. And in my head, until I actually learned that one was a protected title, I was like, oh, nutritionist, dietitian, it's an interchangeable thing. And so for people claiming on, maybe they see a social media page of like, oh, this person's a nutritionist, like I could hire them and they have all the info and accreditations that somebody might not have. And so could you just explain a little bit of the difference there for any of the young athletes?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, good question. I mean, that's the thing, right? Nutrition's not like or nutritionist is not a protected title. So any human being on the planet can just say they're a nutritionist, right? Kind of similar to personal trainer, right? Like you don't necessarily need any background to put on your profile that you're a personal trainer or a nutritionist. So yeah, you got to be careful there. And then from a registered dietitian standpoint, like you've got to have at minimum, the undergrad degree. You have to have gone through the dietetic internship, and then you have to go through that national accreditation exam, and obviously then you got to upkeep your credential and stuff. So every 5 years you got to have so many, I guess like just continued learning opportunities or whatever to make sure you keep your accreditation. So yeah, that's kind of the difference there is that like you'll see. So if you see RD registered dietitian or RDN, registered dietitian nutritionist, like those are the people who have been to school, who've got the accreditation. And yeah, and just have put the time in. I always say like, unfortunately, not every dietitian is going to be great, and just like in any field, right? It's like just because you did the school and you got the title doesn't mean you really know what you're talking about or that you've put a lot of, I think, your personal time and energy into it, right? Not unlike, strength and conditioning, right? But yeah, so look for that RD, that RDN. And then, also make sure you do your due diligence to find somebody who sounds like they're at least making some sense.
Your kind of rant there at the end made me think of when you went to school. I'm not trying to get you in trouble here, but when you went to school, are there things now that you like learned in school that you're like, dude, I don't know. Like when I'm thinking about like my strength conditioning school, I look back on a lot. There's a lot of it where I'm like, I don't really like. It's good to like have the general boxed in knowledge and good, but like real life that doesn't really work. Like were the things like that when you went through school that now you look back on, you're like, oh man, I don't really know about that.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, like I'm not trying to make it political or whatever, but it's like that's kind of, I think how education works, right? Like they kind of teach the curriculum that's been asked of them and in dietetics we take a lot of punishment for like, oh well, you're sponsored by Pepsi and like all these different things and how much are they, deciding on the curriculum and some of the information that's being provided. So I will say like my education was really good and I'm glad that I did it. I mean, there's like I said, I'm a big believer like that's just that just kind of is your foot in the door. That kind of opens the door like a crack, and then it's really up to you at that point to go and figure out like all of like what is actually really important. Where do you want to spend your time and really kind of deep dive into because it just kind of gives you the baseline information on general nutrition and physiology and that type of thing. And then from there, hopefully it sparks the curiosity to want to go deeper. But, if someone just did the 4 year degree and wrote the test, yeah, and especially from like a performance standpoint, you're not going to get much, right? It's a little bit more geared toward medical stuff and, I guess, yeah, like clinical dietetics and stuff where there's a lot more preparing people to work in hospitals and formula-based stuff that's not really super applicable to like everyday life.
Yeah, dude, our strength conditioning sector, ours wasn't a very performance based like our college one. It wasn't like a sports sector, so it was all based off people like getting ready for like PT, AT, and a lot of it was just very like controlled and medical. But in the setting of we're talking about people diving more into education and like learning more about nutrition when they're out of school. And this is something where I feel like the diet world, it goes straight to carnivore. It goes straight paleo, like it goes straight to the next sexy thing. Like, how do you look up this information? How, if you're curious, if you're a person that wants to learn about this stuff, like, obviously, like we're going to you for a good source, but like, where are you learning this stuff from without falling into these traps? Or are there things you can learn from some of these diets, whether it's they work or they don't work, by like exploring them and then coming back out without like I just feel like diet is so polarized sometimes where it's like people get into these cults, man. It is like this is the only way to eat. You got to do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that too, just like for somebody who's not going to go to a 4 year degree or become an RD, like where are some of the good places to begin that general foundation of knowledge that they can then build off of themselves and trial and error for themselves?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great question. So, yeah, I mean, I guess in a few, I'll answer this a couple ways. Like, I do, like, personally, like, I live, like, I kind of like walk the walk, I guess, right? Like, I live this. So, like, I'm very much, interested in, diet and nutrition for my own physical health and performance and well-being and cognition and all of these things. So, there's a great interest in that world for me to do some trial and error on things because I want to, like selfishly, I'm kind of doing this for myself, and then hopefully, get to help a lot of other people in along the way with it, right? So there is a lot of trial and error in there. I think like I will say like, not any of this stuff is like me making up my own stuff. Like I really love like Andy Galpin. I love Dan Garner. Those are my two guys that I kind of rely on the most for a lot of like information and cutting edge information. I've been to some of their seminars and stuff. And when they put information out, I listen, right? Like anything that Dan or Andy are posting in terms of research or whatever, like I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna kind of take a look at what they're looking at. I'm gonna read over that research myself, I'm not one, I think even for just the general athlete or weekend warrior, people who are looking for like more quality evidence, like I'm not using a lot of TikTok or Instagram or whatever for that. I'm using things like open evidence or I'm checking out, what the International Society of Sports Nutrition is saying right now. Trying to get a little bit more quality sources to good research and something that's a little bit, I guess, less biased information, right? So I don't know. I'm kind of floating all around. And then, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I do this for a living, right? So I get an opportunity to, you hear things and I guess you have a little bit more of like a way to like critically evaluate the statements that are being made and understand like, all right, does this make any sense? Or like, is this all just like a bunch of bullshit? And then, you kind of try to draw that line, and then stuff that you feel like maybe makes some sense, you look deeper into it, through some research, and then if it seems like bullshit, I mean, typically, usually the more outrageous it is, the better you can bet that it's not going to be really valid. So.
Dude, give me some bullshit people are falling for.
I think you said it. No, I mean the whole carnivore thing I think is crazy. I think the saturated fat thing right now is a little bit overblown in terms of people saying that it doesn't matter and people just totally, disregarding their cholesterol levels or saying that, carbohydrates aren't necessary for performance or just kind of overdoing things like the electrolytes and sodium and all this stuff. I just think like I don't know, man. Like as an ex-athlete myself, and like I said, I mean, I turned 40 this year, so I'm not the youngest guy anymore. I mean, your focus starts to shift. Like when I was in my 20s, and even I would say up until the last few years, I was kind of just like I don't really give a shit. Like I'm just trying to look the best and feel the best and whatever. And but as time goes on here, you realize you're like, no, like there needs to be more to this than just like doing whatever sounds cool and whatever seems to be like counterintuitive to like the rest of what's going on. But the way I've kind of started to look at it, especially a lot more recently, I work in a medical facility, so I got a little bit, some exposure to some really good doctors and really good minds and stuff. But kind of some of the stuff I'm starting to look at now is just like it's like, do all of these top experts in the world, are they really trying to steer us in the wrong direction? Or like, is that one random dude on TikTok, like, does he know something that the rest of the world doesn't know? Like the World Health Organization is wrong, and all of these governing bodies are wrong. They're steering you in the wrong direction. They want you to be sick, but like, dude on TikTok who has a few thousand followers knows what's right and you should follow his lead. Like I don't know about that, right? Like if you kind of think about that, like just like logically, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I have kind of, I think like I use the guidance of people that are way smarter than me, and then I do my due diligence to kind of try to figure out the details in, my own right.
So one thing that you kind of mentioned there was like doing what's cool or trendy, and I've seen that a lot of like things that are marketed towards people, like the electrolytes. Like, hey, I need a drip drop and I need 1,000 milligrams of sodium, but I work in an office and the only activity I do is 20 minutes of walking during lunch break. In that manner, like the getting the big rocks in place are really important before people get all these little nuances down. What would you say are your top three, five, 10 things that are really, really important for nutrition that people should kind of begin to stack up, build their base on before they dive into these more niche topics?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, so I always just say like I've started using the term fundamentals because the
Fundamentals.
basics, if you just say, oh, it's the basics, it sounds boring, right? And it is, like it is. It's so boring. And that's the problem with nutrition is it's so friggin' boring if you're doing it right. That people I get it, right? I get why people want to go outside the box and try something crazy and do something different that some guy said, will upgrade your testosterone by 10,000% or whatever, but the reality of the situation is like, yeah, I mean the fundamental stuff that has worked since the beginning of time, it's boring, but it works and it always has, right? So, I mean the couple things that I always kind of key in on there's probably about five of them. So like I mean, I guess to walk you through, like I have kind of like I have this thing called like my P's and Q's, right? So like I just feel like it's easy, like when we grow up, your parents always told you to mind your P's and Q's. Like I think there's some nutritional P's and Q's that if we mind those every day, we're putting ourselves, in a position to succeed. I think like number one, this is not, I guess, part of the P's, but is like calorie consumption, right? Like no matter what your goal is you need to have the right amount of calories to support that goal. So if you're trying to, clean 405 pounds, you're probably and put on as much muscle as you possibly can, you're probably going to want to be in some sort of a mild calorie surplus so that you're not, holding yourself back, preventing yourself from maximum strength and lean mass accumulation and that type of thing, right? If we're just trying to like maintain, be super energized, lean, active, whatever, probably more of like a maintenance level. And obviously, if we want fat loss, we're going to have to be in that deficit. So the calories are going to kind of be the king of the equation always, right? And they always have been. Um, and then from there is kind of those P's and Q's, right? So protein, obviously, I mean, I don't think probably have to say it, and with your audience, massively important nowadays, right? The one thing I would say that I've kind of changed my tune on, even over the last course of the last few months, is I used to really push the zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight for athletes. And I still think that's the best way to go because you're going to get all the added benefits of like the tissue just regeneration. So you're going to get all the muscle protein synthesis, but you'll also get the benefits from like tissue recovery and things like that. You're going to get some thermic effect in there. So I still like that recommendation, but I think like zero point 0.7 is enough to build muscle. So there's that kind of thing there. I start with the protein, and then secondarily, I go to plants. And it's kind of a blanket term for like if we can, have that protein and plant focused diet, what that allows us to do is obviously everything the protein is going to do for us physiologically. But then once we get into plants, we've got fiber, we've got antioxidants, we've got polyphenols taken care of, and then also we're like eating high volume foods that allow us to maintain our calorie needs a little bit better, right? So, I mean, those are kind of the big things I think about. And then the third P would be personal preference. I still think there's a huge personal preference aspect that people just tend to ignore with nutrition. So whenever somebody's going to make a change to their diet, it's whatever, January 1st, New Year 2026, and everyone's going to, be perfect with their diet. First thing they do is they throw out all their personal preferences and they just try to follow like a dedicated, plan, right? And no one's able to really stick with that. So, I do think there's a lot of like personal preference stuff where people, it's like not everything you like is going to fit the plan, but probably a lot of stuff you do will fit the plan. And then we got to find a way to make that plan enjoyable. So personal preference is a big piece of the fundamentals. And then like, honestly, it's the cues, right? Is quality and quantity. So, it's like the quality is the peas part, right? Is like, is there a lot of protein? Is there a lot of plants? If the quality is good, eat up, eat more of that. If the quality sucks, then eat less, right? So it's like, the better the quality, the higher the quantity, and the lower the quality, the lower the quantity, basically. So those are literally kind of like what I've boiled it down to, or for lack of a better term, kind of dumbed it down to at this point. Because like no matter what rabbit hole I've gone down with nutrition, whether it's looking at, I don't know, like disease prevention or methylation or anti-inflammatory or supporting muscle mass or digestive health, microbiome, whatever, like at the end of the day, it's going to come down to like protein and then your food quality basically and not overdoing it or underdoing it on calories. Like that's kind of what I realized through everything I've researched. And like obviously you can twist certain dials in there up or down, but I always like say that like my one of the favorite things I always say is like, listen, like no matter what you're aiming for, the recommendation is not going to be more Oreos, Pop-Tarts, and Coca-Colas, right? Like it's always going to be more whole foods, and that kind of lends us or leads us down that road of like protein and plant-based foods, you know?
Dude, Big Pepsi's gonna take away that title of yours right there. But that's you mentioned a really like cool thing with that personal preference because this is, I think, very relatable to the strength conditioning field, the fitness field of like you have the science of what a good program is, right? And if we were all robots, you could put them on this like perfect 3x10 thing and just like plug it into them, have them go do it, have them sit on a treadmill, whatever. But then you get to the I don't know if you want to talk about the artistic side of it, the personal preference side of it, the ability to enjoy the movement part. If that's not there, they're not going to do the science part of it. How do you do that and approach that in the diet world where it's like there are these facts, there's are these things you need to be doing, but there's also I need to like paint it into your world so that you eat the foods you enjoy. Not because I want you to like just because if you enjoy Oreos, I don't want you eating Oreos, but it's like I want you to do the smart things, and if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to actually follow the science.
Yeah, totally. No, and I mean, kind of over the course of time here with experience, you learn like there's no point putting together the perfect plan if someone can't stick to it or doesn't want to or ends up hating it or whatever, right? So a lot of it is like it's like start with the personal preferences and like not for nothing, like I think probably like from the nutrition standpoint, if we were really looking to go like top tier, like a 90-10 approach is really good, right? So that still gives people 10% of the time where they can kind of eat what they want and enjoy themselves. And the big thing I always think about is like I always think about it in like two buckets, right? Like you got like the bucket of what you need and the bucket of what you want, right? I really try to focus with people on like filling the bucket of what they need first. And then, if there's a little bit of spillover and we get to have a little bit of what we want, then even better, right? And I think the big thing is that like honestly, like I said, like we can get away with if we've got proper calorie control and we've got adequate protein intake, your diet doesn't have to be perfect. There's room for things like Oreos or, having a birthday cake or whatever's going on, if you love chocolate or whatever, there's room for that stuff. Obviously very person to person independent, right? I mean, some people have less leeway, some have more, and especially that, you got an athletic crowd. So it's like typically the more athletics you're doing or the more calories you're burning or the more active you are, the more leeway you get on this stuff, right? If you choose to sit on the couch and do nothing, then you probably have to get pretty restrictive with your diet, right? You don't get much of a leash there. So it's really like working with the person and trying to figure out like, all right, like how are we going to make this happen? Some people, I'd say their diet quality is excellent. I have some people that are they just nail it on the head every day. And then I have other people where it is a little bit more of a workaround where we know there's going to be, meals out. We know there's going to be drinks or it's, they've got families and there's pizza nights and, they're out doing birthday parties with kids or whatever is going on, right? So it's really like, it's just finding that happy medium, but letting like having people really understand that it like if the goal like whatever the goal is, right? So if the goal is to, most people I work with, it's lose 5 to 10 pounds and build muscle and burn some fat and feel better, right? So if that's the goal, just being very honest with yourself about like, all right, like where's the low-hanging fruit so that if we need to continue to get a little bit more restrictive or adjust your calories in some way, we can do that, right? And then I think like as long as we know what the goal is, people have the opportunity to decide whether it's worth it for them or not. And then, we can always adjust the variables. But yeah, it's kind of tricky, but it's not, it's definitely not impossible.
Yeah, dude. And with all that stuff, one of the things that you hear in the fitness world a ton is basically like these big jacked up steroided up dudes that are just telling people like they're mentally weak for eating whatever like eat like shit because you're mentally weak because you're lazy like whatever. And one of the things I've realized in my ripe age of 29 here throughout the years is the cravings and almost like food addiction and like when like dude there are some times where I'm like I will be, it's typically when I'm traveling or like I'm doing a lot of activities and like I will go to a gas station and just house a thing of candy. And like by the time I'm done with it, I don't like, I'm like, oh my God, dude, I like house that with it. Like it wasn't even me anymore making that decision, right? You know what I mean? And I realize the healthier that I eat, the more that I'm drawn to healthy foods. And the more consistent I am with that, the more like my gut actually craves it versus if I go on like a spree where I'm just like eating like crap or I'm traveling, my body stops like craving the healthy thing and starts like urging for like this sugar, urging for like this processed food. And it's really crazy like how fast that like rewiring happens. And maybe it's not, maybe it's just me, but I feel like everybody I've talked to has had that experience. But like the fitness approach is just to yell at those people rather than like getting them to realize like, hey, a lot of those decisions, like they're so almost like prime, like they happen so automatically. Like they're consuming those calories, they're consuming that food without even realizing they're doing it, without even realizing that craving that they had. And it's just like automatic. It's just what they do. Like, what's your approach with that? What's your thought process around those things?
Yeah, that's probably the majority of what I do. Like I kind of, have toyed with the idea of not even calling myself a nutritionist or whatever. It's more of a dietary strategist, where it's just like, it's quite literally like I'm the biggest believer that, human beings, we're just like pattern, habit, and routine driven people, right? So to your point there about like once you get going on the snack foods or the sugary foods or whatever, like there's definitely a component of like taste buds and gut microbiome and things like that, altering a little bit. And like definitely, right? It's like, I don't know. I just think of like foods that I've cut out of my life that I used to find so good or whatever. And then you have, it's 5 years later. Like I remember like Reese's peanut butter cup. Like I hadn't had one in forever. And then a couple of years ago, I'm like, it was Halloween. I have one, and it just tasted like chemicals. And I was just like, this
Yeah,
is
it's crazy the
awful. Like,
shift.
yeah, I was just like, man, this is not how I remember this, right? So things can change from like a taste bud standpoint and a, microbiome standpoint and stuff for sure that can change. I think maybe some of those cravings physiologically, but like I said, I think 99% is coming just down to habits, routines, patterns, reward centers in the brain, whatever it is, right? Emotional stuff. So the big thing I work with people is like just being hyper aware of that stuff. Um, and then trying to find workarounds, right? Like it's not an easy thing to do, but once we can identify a problem, then we can work to solve it, right? So like a lot of times I've had people that, essentially what happens is it becomes just kind of like a pattern, right? It's like, hey, when this person had a hard day, immediately they default to like I'm stopping for fast food and I need to have a bottle of wine tonight because I was stressed, therefore I get this reward to help calm myself down, right? And it's like, okay, that's great. Like that was working at one point to, I guess, soothe one issue, but now it's creating more issues than it's helping, right? In terms of your health, or your body weight, or your composition, your performance, whatever it wants to be. So that's the big thing is honestly, I think like I'm big on using like with my coaching clients and stuff, I do use a food log. I think it brings a lot of awareness, not only to like how much people are eating, but definitely like macro consumption. And a lot of people will say it just brings that level of accountability for me on them and then obviously for them themselves, right? So they're like, yeah, like when I'm logging my food and I have to put in a half a bottle of wine and I see it's 600 calories, like I don't even want to do it. So I just skip it, and it brings a lot of awareness to the situation. So that's kind of what I go after most is like, yeah, finding these routines, these habits, these patterns where they're no longer serving you anymore. And then honestly doing the difficult work to get in there and figure out, okay, like how do we rewire these things? How do we reroute them? How do we find, things that are going to be a better option? And like in the beauty of today's world is there's always a better option. There's always a solution, right? It's just most people never like they just ruminate on the problem forever. Like you could ask anybody in the world, right? Like what's everything that's wrong with you? They'll tell you everything that's wrong with them. They'll know all of it, but they don't go beyond that, right? We always just stop at like, yeah, I suck at this, and then there's never any work to solve the problem. So what I do with people is we identify that stuff. They already know it's there. So then we just work through that problem and try to solve it.
Dude, Tristan, before you go, I got to talk about a food nutrition thing that I'm like a food tracker. I was working with this Wisconsin offensive lineman. He had just retired from playing like sports. He was like, I think 340 pounds and really wanted to like, he didn't need to be that big anymore. Was doing the food tracker that you were talking about. He's like, dude, Great week, phenomenal week. No fast food this week. I cooked everything from home, and I was like looking through, and he's like all hyped up, and I was pumped for him. Like yes, let's go, dude. And then I look at his food tracker, dude, 10 to 20 beers a night. And he listed that in there and like had no idea, dude. Just like Wisconsin drinking it like it was water. And I was like, dude, amazing job on the fast food, but like what's this 10 to 20 beers a night thing? And like I literally he had no idea. He had no I mean he's like, oh, I don't know, dude. Like we just kind of drink like a case and like it's what we do. And like we cut dude, Tristan, it's not even a joke, dude. We cut it down. The 3 to 5 beers a night is pretty much everything else was staying the same. He was moving a little bit more. He lost 80 pounds in like I think it was a 6 month period, if not less than that. It was wild. Just and he had no idea. And I had no idea he was doing it either. I was just going off what he was saying. And then I actually looked at his food tracker. I'm like, holy crap, that is insane.
Yeah, that I was gonna say that's similar to when people have like, 10, 12 sodas a day, and you're like, hey man, if we just cut out those sodas, like you're gonna be like almost 1,000 calories
Yeah.
less per day, man. I think you'll lose a lot of weight. It's like, yeah, I lost 50 pounds. What'd you do? Nothing. Just stop drinking Coke. And you're like, all right.
Yeah, honestly, I had the same experience. A guy, local guy here to New York, he was on the Giants practice squad, and same thing, just fasting Monday through Friday, only eating a couple meals a day, but cranking booze on the weekend, and then like eating, Taco Bell, $50 worth of Taco Bell at 3 a.m. on Friday night and Saturday night, and just yeah, drinking beers and liquor and whatever, and then the exact same situation. It's like honestly, I think what we did is we just cut out like the late night Taco Bell and just had him cool it on the booze a little bit. I think I just had him pick up like a deli sandwich to have for after the bar or whatever. And yeah, guy like dropped, I think 50 or more pounds like really quickly. Just yeah, it's amazing how, just little things like that. But whether it's people don't want to admit it or it just kind of, it's so routine that it slips their mind. Like, on a smaller scale, I think that just happens with a lot of people on the day to day, right? It's like, they just walk around the office and they're working and they're doing whatever and they're grabbing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, bite of this, bite of that, pack of whatever here and there. Maybe they do have an orange juice or a soda or something at breakfast or, later in the day. And it's like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's 500, 600 calories easily consumed that people don't even know they did it, right? So there's a big piece of that for sure.
One thing I've been curious on for nutritionists and dietitian or not nutritionists, dietitians is for like a strength coach or a skills coach, there's a lot when they're doing a workout, like being able to help them with the form, help them like actually get better at the skill. For dietetics, do you help somebody like learn how to cook better, I guess? Because if you're saying like, hey, we're going to have like chicken for this meal, I'm just thinking in my head, there is an infinite number of ways to prepare chicken, some that are amazing and I could eat every day for the rest of my life, and some where if that was the only way I was served chicken, I would never eat chicken again. And I feel like some people just don't know that. Like there was examples of foods that I didn't like eggs, and it was only because I had army powdered eggs, and I thought that's how eggs were. And so I just really never had eggs until I was forced to at someone's house because that's all we had. I was like, dude, these are amazing. And so do you have experiences like that where you can point people to like basic cooking techniques that can actually make food enjoyable and realize that you don't have to have dry, unseasoned chicken reheated with white rice in a Tupperware container every day to be a healthy person?
Yeah, totally. That's another huge thing I deal with, right? Because there is like that diet. I guess like that's what people think, right? When they think of diet, they think of boiled chicken with boiled broccoli and white rice, and there's no salt and there's no spice, and it's just very bland, and you can't think outside the box or anything like that. So yeah, that's a big piece of what I do as well. So couple things is like I'm huge on like the education piece because I think like as like adults and even as like whatever teenagers, young athletes, whatever, like knowledge is power, right? And I do like unfortunately there's just a massive knowledge deficit when it comes to understanding food, understanding the calories in food, or even you ask people like what's a carbohydrate and they'll say bread. But like they've got no answer beyond that, right? Like they don't know what foods have carbohydrates, what foods have proteins. So many people I talk to, they're proud of themselves because they eat a lot of peanut butter because they think it's a protein source, right? Um, so there's a huge knowledge deficit there. So I do go after that and I do a lot of education around like, okay, how do we, yeah, like essentially construct a meal, right? That's going to be along the guidelines of what you need to do to create the goal that you have, right? Or achieve that goal. So there's definitely a huge educational component there, and then helping people understand, yeah, like certain ways they can prepare things where maybe we're not adding a lot of calories, but we're adding a lot of flavor, whether that's whatever, spices or different things we can use. But I think the big one that I try to get through to everybody is that there's no perfect like, Tristan, you need to eat chicken, broccoli, and rice on Monday for lunch or you're doing it wrong. It's largely about understanding like a structure, right? So basically, if we just understand like what your ideal structure is for a meal, and like composition, then you can go wherever you want. Like, I mean, I really do think I'm like, I always talk about like a plan ABC, right? So plan A would be like, all right, you're making food at home. Plan B would be you're ripping through a restaurant or a Chipotle or something like that. And plan C is like you're going to 7-Eleven. There's a way to hit your calorie and macronutrient needs anywhere you go, but you got to understand the structure and the framework of that meal, right? So the easiest thing, again, it always comes back to like kind of the protein and plant situation, right? So it's like, all right, if we've got, learning how much your ideal protein portion should look like, right? You weigh and measure a piece of protein 5 times, you know exactly what it looks like. It's pretty quick to figure that out. Understanding the difference, I think where what becomes important is like the carbohydrate part, right? So understanding that like when you go to the restaurant tonight, and they serve you a plate of spaghetti this big, that's 3 times the amount of carbohydrate you probably need in a meal, or maybe half, so you can start to understand like, all right, what does an ideal meal, structure or composition look like for you? And then you can just try to reenact that everywhere you go, right? So I'm a big believer in like doing a little bit of home cooking so that you get a really good understanding of like what a meal looks like or should look like for you. And then when you go to the restaurant, you have the opportunity to recreate that at the restaurant. Whether you do that or not is a different story, right? I mean, everybody can go to the restaurant and order, the grilled chicken salad with double chicken, and they can order a side of rice or a side of spaghetti or a side of baked potato, and they can get the job done. It just depends if you like, the problem is that most people don't want to do that, right? And then that kind of gets back into the mindset around it all. But and then even like a 7-Eleven, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, you can, like Austin was saying, it's like you can go to 7-Eleven and be down a bag of candy before you even realize what happened. But you can also grab like a Core Power protein shake, a bag of nuts, and a banana, and walk out with something that's very macronutrient and even like body composition friendly, right? So to me, it's more. It's not necessarily about the specifics, right? Of like you need to eat only these foods or you can't do this, right? It's more like learn your structure, learn what that ideal composition is going to be for you, and then try to reenact that as often as you can, and then again, if you're not doing it enough, we'll know. And then we just got to get realistic about like, all right, like where can we continue to make adjustments that are a little bit more in favor of, your future self kind of situation.
Hell yeah. I love that gas station and kind of restaurant hack. Do you have any hacks for you were talking about how you can spice up like Tristan, I was the same way with chicken. Like I made myself hate chicken from the way that I cooked it in college compared to now when I cook it. I'm like, dude, it's one of my favorite things. If I put it in a crock pot with a bunch of tomatoes and like corn, it's so amazing. It's so good. Do you have any like consistent or like easy to do like flavor hacks that people can do to like make their food taste better at home?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I really like the air fryer. I think like the air fryer helps people. I mean, I don't know. To me, it makes stuff taste good. It's easy. And then really it's just coming down to like spices and things that you like, right? So, I mean, yeah, I'm a big believer in like use as many spices and things that and herbs and whatnot that you can use. Make things really flavorful, right? Try different combinations of things so that stuff doesn't get as boring. Like you said, you do some tomatoes and some different spices and things. You got something more Italian. You do a curry spice or something, and you got something a little more Indian type. You whatever. You mix in some lentils or beans or something like that, and we can get different flavorings, like just different combinations of stuff. So that's really it. And then it's to me, it's just like, yeah, just get creative. I'm not really like a great chef by any means, but I mean, my go-to, what I really love is just like a basic stir fry. So, yeah, I mean, I just get some ground meat, I cook that up, I spice it with, I mean, I'm kind of a Trader Joe's guy, so like I go to Traders, they have all those cool spices, I throw in whatever the hell I want, and it usually comes out pretty good. If you're using a lot of spices, just maybe be a little bit mindful that not all of them are super salty, right? Like go more for just the herbs or the spice as opposed to something where the first ingredient is salt. But yeah, I think you can get a lot of things done that way. And then I will say also too, like you guys mentioned, like coming back to the personal preferences, like, yeah, if you eat only powdered eggs, like you're gonna hate them, right? So like find a workaround, right? Find a way that you enjoy stuff. So like for me, for instance, like I actually really like roasted Brussels sprout, right? If you got a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt or something on there and roast it, I could eat that stuff all day. It's really good. But if I have like a boiled or, soft cook, it's just I find it disgusting, right? So it's really more a matter of like, you know, be like learn like take this as a learning opportunity, like start to find what you like and what you don't like, and yeah, start doing more of what you like and less of what you don't, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But I think again, if it's the difference between you going home and making a chicken breast that's, I don't know, got a little bit of some stuff in it and maybe a few extra calories versus you stopping at a McDonald's or something on the way home, like you take the first option every day, right? So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but it's really coming down to personal preference.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I liked how you laid that out because I talk about this on, we have a little meathead cookbook, but it's kind of crazy how you can, like, basically it's the same meal. It's like chicken, right? And you can make, or ground beef. That's one that I do a lot. And I can make my ground beef meal. It's pretty much the same meal, but it's like 12 different meals because I added in a different veggie, a different sauce, a different spice, and you can come, it's like so simple. I cooked up the same exact thing and I can make 12 different meals. So I don't make myself hate it over and over again. And that's been something in the last 2 years that I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, I can actually make this not suck the entire time I do it. And now I look forward to eating that meal rather than dreading eating the same exact meal over and over again.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I'm a big like, anything low calorie, so hot sauce, salsas, vinegars, things like that, along with the spices. Like you can really spice things up pretty good. And then my wife does a lot of like, the Instagram, social media type baking, and I always joke because it's like it doesn't matter what she makes. She can make 12 different like healthy dessert options. They all have the same ingredients, yet somehow they're different. It's like got oats and egg and a banana, and somehow it turns into like 14 different dessert options. But like, I don't know. But again, it's just like, yeah, think outside the box. The cool thing about, social media and the internet and stuff now is there is a million. I mean, there's no shortage of recipes or, ideas like this. So yeah, get out there and kind of seek the information you need, and it's out there for sure.
I have a few questions for some of my endurance sport nerds that I definitely wanted to ask you because I always feel like they're on the forefront of every possible marginal gain. And a few of them, one of the questions that I have is the amount of processed foods that they have due to just the high caloric expenditure that they have. And one of the studies that we talked about, I'm sure you've seen it, was with like Christian Blumenfeld. He was a triathlete for who like 2.5 years had 7 to 8 thousand calories per day, like energy expenditure, and he was like kind of groundbreaking in exceeding 2.5 times that BMR that no one really thought was possible. And they went into how he had so many processed foods, but it was absolutely necessary for him, and just kind of going into the thought process behind that because I know some people get caught up like, oh, this is super, super bad for me. When it's like, yeah, it probably isn't the greatest, but you're chasing performance.
Yeah, and that's where you got to make that determination, right? Like, what are you chasing, right? Are you chasing optimal health, or are you chasing optimal performance? The two live in very different worlds, right? As you guys know, as athletes, it's like, yeah, athletes aren't always like the healthiest people on the planet. And like honestly, even from, you talk about like if I went things I did wrong during my playing days, I got too caught up on the restrictive nature. I always say like I wish I had less grilled chicken salads after game nights and more pizzas and more sandwiches and things like that because those calorically would have been 10 times better for my energy needs, my recovery, all that stuff. So I wish I'd have known that back in the day, right? So that is a huge piece of it, right? Is I think, from an athletic standpoint, especially when your calories are up over like 3,000 calories. I mean, I've worked with so many people, and like I said, we do we do track our food, right? It's going to be very hard for you not to get your nutrient needs in if you're eating anywhere over 3,000 calories a day, right? Because even if you just had like a 50-50 split of like whole foods and maybe some processed foods, the volume of food and the volume of calories you're consuming, you're going to still be taking care of probably the large majority of your nutrient needs. So it kind of becomes a lot less important, honestly. So I would say like from that athletic standpoint, but also with health in mind, I think try to structure meals around whole foods, but understand that at the end of the day, calories are still the king of the equation. So yeah, do you have some, some fruit and some vegetables and, you want to do more fiber dense carbohydrates and stuff further away from your training? Absolutely, right? Like you're going to want those things. But the reality is like if you need 3, 5, 6,000 calories in a day, you're not getting there on grilled chicken salads and sweet potatoes. It's just not happening. So yeah, it's just finding that balance. And then I think again, personal preference and for a lot of people like gut health, like just the ability to, digest and absorb and metabolize these foods. Like some people might do better on whole foods and some people might do better on a little bit more processed foods that just digest a little bit easier. And then that's all kind of things that you take into account.
And then along that same lines, two separate questions here, but one is that like the excessive amount of carbs per hour has become really, really popular in the endurance athlete. Like my brother-in-law, he went to Tokyo, and I think for the Olympics there, he was having like 140 to 150 grams of carbs an hour, and it was something that he trained up to. Is that something that is really realistic that like a normal person can train up to and need, and how should they go about doing that?
I mean, honestly, probably not. Like it wouldn't, and it wouldn't be something you would be doing for long term, right? Like, I mean, yeah, if you're going to run some endurance, event or whatever, then sure, right? Like you can try to train up to that. I think like for 99% of the population, I think I was actually looking this up. I think like only what like 1 to 3% of the population even does like these insane endurance events anyway, so I get it's cool that that's like your people, which is great. But I think it's one of those things where yeah, like you're not gonna live in that range of over 1,000 grams of carbohydrate a day on the day to day, right? I think somebody could easily kind of push maybe, whatever, call it 500 plus a day. That wouldn't be a problem. But yeah, I mean, leading into these competitions and stuff, if you're really pushing, I mean, obviously, it's just at that point, I mean, I don't even know how you would really get that amount of carbohydrates in. It's going to be a lot of liquid, it's going to be a lot of candy and processed foods and things like that. But I don't see that as being like unless you're doing some kind of insane amount of training every day, right? I don't even know that it would be highly necessary. Like I would probably just again keep carbohydrate intake really high, make sure you were getting a lot of carbohydrate, probably like 100 plus grams pre like the night before. Probably want to get 100 plus in the morning and then 50 to 100, maybe 60 to 45 minutes out kind of thing. But it just depends like what the event would be, right?
And then my last one before I take over on this, as I know a lot of them really like some of these substances, so like beta alanine, different ketones, the sodium bicarb, all the different nitrates, and there seems to be a lot of discrepancy on how effective they are, and people will spend boatloads and boatloads of money on these things. Could you kind of just go into the efficacy or where you would think the big stones would be on some of these supplements for athletes, especially endurance athletes?
Yeah, I think where I'd start with the endurance athletes is like again, like I don't go too crazy on supplementation. So I would still start with like calories are going to be the king. They're going to be way better than any beta alanine supplement ever is going to be probably for you in terms of endurance. Carbohydrate, caffeine. I think those are the three things that I kind of think about in terms of like performance pushers, right? Is that, yeah, I think you get a huge bang for your buck with, calories, carbs, and caffeine. And then at that point, too, if we're looking to kind of move the needle just that little bit more, then I think that's where some of these things come in where, I mean, like creatine, not going to really do anything for you in an endurance setting. Alanine, yeah, might help you out a little bit. So making sure that you're on the alanine and you're doing that consistently. I think, what is it like? You need about 4 weeks for it to saturate the cells and be getting the max benefit from it. I think again, like nitrates and things of that nature, like yes, they're absolutely like they can be helpful, right? Like we definitely want oxygenation. We want, more oxygen floating through the blood and delivering more oxygen to tissues and stuff. So I certainly think, trying to do maybe about a gram of some kind of like nitrate supplement before training can be really helpful. But beyond that, like I still think like I'd probably gear myself more toward actually going, and especially if we're talking endurance sports, like going more toward adequate carbohydrate throughout that event, and then maybe even introduction of a little bit of caffeine here and there, and just trying to push it from that aspect.
Dude, that needs to be your shirt. Cows, carbs, and caffeine.
No, right?
That'd be a bestseller. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, we're talking about performance versus health. A lot of times you'll see these super jacked, super ripped guys, and that's what we look at as like the epitome of health, right? And then you have a lot of those guys. I mean, if it's in the bodybuilding world, they have like heart attacks, like a lot of things that are not actually healthy underneath the surface. What are some of your like when you're looking at this, where it's like almost like a red light of it looks healthy on the surface, but underneath the surface it is not.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. This is actually a place where, like I said, over the last few years, I've changed my mindset a lot on this, and it's just through exposure. So I'm really lucky that I work in a medical facility, like a membership-based medical facility. It's awesome. Like we have access to everything. Very cool place and a very awesome place to work. And one of the reasons I went in there is because I knew I was going to learn a ton and get exposure to a lot of stuff. But that's honestly like do blood work. That is my, and like honestly, monitor your health because I'm in the same boat, right? Like I'm, like I said, I'm almost turning 40. I'm hugely focused on, my aesthetics and staying lean and my body composition and my performance and stuff. So I always used to think that as long as I was, had a six pack, that I was a healthy guy, right? But then you go and you get into the blood work and you see, okay, like, maybe cholesterol levels are elevated a little bit. Maybe, even like genetically, you've got an elevated LP little a, which puts you at a risk for, increased risk for heart disease. Maybe your blood pressure isn't perfect, like, but this is all stuff that can and sh needs to be monitored, right? Because again, like I said, I mean, it's not always the healthiest thing, the way that, athletes are pushing their bodies or even the way that athletes are eating sometimes, right? So, I mean, that's honestly the big thing is I think like get blood work, right? And then as you're aging, like make sure you're staying on top of your heart health with a cardiologist and some various, scans and things around from that side of the street. And you can, I mean, honestly, you probably save your life, right? Like so that's really like I think that's the big change or the big shift that I've made personally over the last few years is just like understanding that like just because you look good with your shirt off doesn't mean anything really at the end of the day from a health standpoint. And then that's literally where you have to go and you need to do your due diligence and get the right blood work and exams and stuff done to make sure that you truly are healthy.
And on the other side of things, so we went into performance, the guys that are ripped. The other thing that you see, and I see this a lot, is the sauna bros. I mean, a lot of them are my buddies. They're going to be called out right now, but it's like, dude, I see their diets. Like they're eating just the most ridiculous diets. They're about 20 to 30 pounds overweight. And their whole thing is like the reason it's like, dude, I'm on a diet. I'm just my metabolism's messed. My metabolism shut off. My metabolism's super slow. I just have a bad metabolism. Like, well, you were jacked in college like 3 years ago, and then you stopped moving and you started eating a ridiculous diet. So it might have something. But like, what's your thought process on the metabolism when it comes to people like they start blaming everything on their metabolism?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we've got enough research now that shows that it's probably not the metabolism and it's much more the lifestyle. So, yeah, I mean, hey, we all hear that, right? Like, oh, I'm 30 now, my metabolism, or I'm 40 now, my metabolism just every year, right? It's just gets worse, right? But no, I mean, the reality of that is like, I don't think metabolism, I mean, there's research around this. I think it's 60, right? Like, I don't think metabolism really starts to slow until about the age of 60 years old, as long as you keep yourself going and you're not falling victim to sarcopenia or, losing muscle after the age of, 40, 50 years old kind of thing, right? Which is a possibility. So, no, I mean, I think that's the big thing. And I think like rather than it being like an attack on people and their thought process, I think it's like it should be like welcomed information, right? So it's like, no, I mean, your metabolism is not broken. Like, it's your lifestyle just is not supporting it right now, right? And that should be promising to a lot of people because you're not screwed, basically. But there is something that needs to get figured out, whether that's you're consuming too much, you're not, too many calories, you're not active enough. Like I think in a lot of cases, also like macronutrient distribution could be off. Like obviously, way under consuming protein and probably over consuming, simple carbs and fats and salt and things like that, which is obviously just not going to be beneficial from a body comp standpoint or even a calorie control standpoint. So, no, I mean, that's the reality of it is, I mean, in most cases, and again, again, I'm big on testing for all this stuff, right? So, I mean, again, this is going way back, but if it's electrolytes, like you can test for that. Like go buy a NIC sensor, you wear a NIC sensor for a few workouts, you'll know exactly what electrolyte replenishment you need. If we're talking about metabolism, go do an RMR test. Like just literally go breathe into a tube for 10 minutes. It'll tell you exactly what your metabolism is or, if it's broken or not, right? And then that way you just have the data and the information and you can work off it. So even if, yeah, your BMR is estimated to be 1700 and it's only 1550, all right, well now we know. So either you make up with that with some extra activity or you make up with it with a little bit less food. But at the end of the day, like these aren't things that we can't work around. It's just, again, it's like, you know, problem identifiers, just not, we don't want to solve.
This may is kind of a little bit of a hot button issue, and if you don't feel like it's your expertise, feel free to say so. But with all the introduction, I see them on the ads all the time, the GLP ones, the
Yes, I was gonna ask
Wegovys,
this.
and all this stuff. You always see at the bottom that's very, very well hidden, right? Weight loss with exercise and appropriate diet changes. And I think when you look into them, they are incredible drugs that if people can actually change their lifestyle and their habit with them, can be great life changers for them. But what is your expertise and knowledge with them that people should have in their minds before they start something like that?
Yeah, great question. No, I mean, I literally, because I'm at this medical place, so every day I'm dealing with people on GLP-1s. And yeah, so I mean, I actually, initially, I think like most people in the fitness world, when they came out, I was like, fuck these things. These are cheating. These are, like whatever. But honestly, now, like just seeing the amount of people that have gone on them and seen a tremendous benefit, and even just like hearing people's talk about just having like for the first time in their life like less food noise and just less like that constant mental drive to be eating or especially just the cravings for sugar and alcohol and all these different things. So I actually do think there can be a benefit to them for the right people. But like you said, I mean, the reality is when like the main feature of these things is that they're gonna impair your appetite, right? And when you're not consuming a lot of calories, and especially like the less calories you're consuming, the bigger the risk you run of burning through a lot of muscle, right? Like muscle is a more metabolically costly tissue to maintain than fat mass is. So the big thing you see with this is people start getting a weight loss result quickly and like not that everybody's in this position, but a lot of times it's like, oh well, I'm losing so much weight, like I don't really need to go to the gym or whatever. I can just, keep not eating very much and I'm good to go here, right? But then, I mean, I'm lucky, like I get to track this stuff through DEXA scans, right? So like we'll DEXA scan somebody before, we'll DEXA scan them in the middle. And a lot of times you do see like a significant amount of lean mass lost if people aren't staying in the gym. And vice versa. Like I've seen people that stay active and stay physically fit and doing all that stuff, and you get a lot less lean mass loss, right? So that's the big thing is it's like if you're going to be on the GLP-1 and if you think that that's the right thing for you or you want to give it a go, I'm not opposed to it, but the two things that have to happen is you need to continue weight training or you need to prioritize weight training and you need to get adequate protein, right? And with that reduced appetite, it's not always easy and especially because protein is not very hyperpalatable, right? Like people typically aren't gonna, if you got a poor appetite to begin with, you don't want to sit down to a 6 ounce chicken breast 3 times a day to try to get your 10 grams of protein in or whatever it is, right? So, yeah, I think that's the tricky thing, but is very important for people to understand is that it can be a great tool, but I don't think at the mercy of half your muscle mass kind of thing.
Heck yeah. A couple more hot button or like gym bro type things you hear. Uh, you can't out train a bad diet, and abs are built in the kitchen. What's your thought process there? Like, how do you approach that? Because I know movement is a big part of what you talk about. You said you should move more and eat in moderation. There's a balance there. When people say those things, what's your initial thought process? How do you handle those things?
Yeah, I mean, you can out eat or you can out train a bad diet for sure. I'm just not, it's not typical, it's not common, and I wouldn't recommend taking that approach either. So like I am very much like, kind of like I mentioned there at the beginning, it's like the more you're doing, the more leeway you get. If you're a world class, I don't know, CrossFit athlete and you're burning 6,000 calories a day, then yeah, you're probably going to have a little bit more pizza and hamburgers and whatnot because you need the energy, right? If you're, the CEO that, wakes up in the morning is stressed from, morning till night, you might get in some walking or a 30-minute weight training session or elliptical session, then obviously you're not going to out train a poor diet, right? So I do think like exercise can be a great equalizer in the equation. But again, being a dietitian, like I just think like from a health standpoint and a longevity standpoint and just like energy and vitality and like waking up like feeling good. I mean, the higher the quality of the diet, the better that's going to go for you always, right? Like I'm a massive believer in like food quality being kind of the just something that people don't understand the value of until they try it. And I've worked with so many people where even just, starting to eat a little bit healthier and maybe taking a multivitamin, they always say to me, they're like, man, like, like it's only been a couple days, but I feel so much better. Like, is this normal? Is that supposed to, or am I just like, is it placebo? And the first thing I say is, I'm like, no, it's absolutely normal because it doesn't take 2 weeks for vitamins and minerals to start getting put to use in your body, right? So when you have a higher quality diet that's got more vitamins and more minerals, and you're providing your cells the building blocks that they need to produce energy, it's like, yeah, I mean, you're gonna feel great immediately, right? So I'm really a big believer that like diet, I think it's both, right? It's like my side is like I'm gonna try to eat as healthy as I can possibly eat, and I'm gonna try to exercise as much as I can possibly exercise, and I'm gonna crush a shit ton of exercise, and then I can still crush a shit ton of really good food, and if some other stuff sneaks in there, it is what it is, but I just try to stay very mindful of like what and how often I do that and I just try to commit to the both and it's like I don't know, to me that's a pretty good recipe for like looking, feeling, functioning really well.
One more similar kind of topic, and maybe you don't have an answer for it either, but like, what is like one of the most overrated health foods that people typically go and underrated health foods that people tend to just neglect or forget about?
Oh, good question. So this will surprise you. I'm more recently, I would say the more overrated would be like excessive vegetable intake. And don't get me wrong, like I'm a huge proponent of like you should eat as many vegetables as you can, but they don't move the needle as much for people on the macronutrients or even some of the micronutrients that we need. So I think like some of the things that are, and I guess in saying that, some of the things that are a little bit more underrated I think of the things that we just consume less of. Like I've really become a big fan of like seeds, right? Like I really love like chia seeds, ground flax seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, because they provide a ton of fiber and they also provide a lot of antioxidants like vitamin E, vitamin A, stuff like that that we maybe aren't getting from other foods, right? And when we think of our vegetables, again, they should still be in the diet, but so many people's like first thing that they do is they're just like, okay, I'm gonna eat healthier, so I'm just gonna eat, massive salads. There's probably not as much fiber in trying to eat, pounds of salad every day as there is in just like having some chia seed, having some flaxseed, having some berries, having some avocado and some sweet potato, right? Like you'll get way more bang for your buck there. And I've actually built that out, right? Where I built, I think it was, I forget exactly what the diet was, but I calorie controlled it. Um, and basically, with all the salads and apples and whatever vegetables, it was like you could get to like 20 grams of carbohydrate or 20 grams of fiber. And then if you switch that up and you went with like seeds and berries and lentils and things like that, same amount of calories. It was 700 calorie diet is what it was. Same amount of calories. There was I'm remembering this now. So the first whey was 700 calories, it was about 150 grams of carbohydrate and 20 grams of fiber. The second whey with the seeds and the berries and all that stuff, 700 calories, 100 grams of carbohydrate. There was like 25 grams of protein in there, and there was 40 grams of fiber. So I know that's like, hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but like the reality is like that's kind of where I go is like a lot of these things that you just kind of default to is like that's like health food. It's like, yeah, but like there's actually probably a quicker and easier road there, and it might even be better digestively, might be a little bit better from a macronutrient composition standpoint, and we might actually be able to, get just as much done or more, with a little bit of a different approach. So yeah, I would say that actually, like, keep eating vegetables, but don't think that they're like the holy grail of all things nutrient dense. Proteins are also super nutrient dense, right? So having a little bit more of a varied diet and then some of these, seeds and nuts and stuff like that can be a huge add for people.
Oh, that was a good little rant. Last question of the podcast, very similar of the food, over and underrated supplements. I see you got the supplements on the backboard. What's the process there? Over underrated for
No.
those.
I know, right? I was gonna do some kind of a social media thing. It never panned out, but all right. Let's see here. Overrated, I'm just going after amino acids right away. I mean, it's to me, it's too easy. It's like, especially for athletes, like we're getting adequate protein, right? Like you really probably don't need any additional amino acids. You have already got a full cup sitting there. You're just, overfilling that cup and you're not really getting any benefit there. So I think like the amino acids, I would even say, like, to an extent, the electrolytes I just think are very overblown nowadays. Like I said, I don't think they're a bad supplement, but I just think like there's probably not a reason to be sucking back an element packet first thing in the morning every day when you wake up, unless you test it and realize that you do need the stuff, right? So that's kind of the direction I go with, like, overrated. I'll also say, and just because I think more needs to be done here, all of these like longevity supplements, like your urolithin A's and your NMNs and all NAD and all of these things, promising, but I don't know that I'd be spending the $100 a month on a bottle of these things just yet. I just don't know that there's that much research to support the efficacy of them. So those are things where, like, I wouldn't prioritize that. I don't know that I would tell people not to take it, but if I was on some kind of a budget, like, and I was trying to not take 1,000 supplements, I probably wouldn't even bother with those things just yet.
Sweet. And not a question, but lastly, where can people find you?
Oh yeah. I guess probably easiest place is social media. So it's nutrition coach, all one word, underscore Adam. I think that'll get you on Instagram. I think my TikTok is the same. I'm gonna look right now because I'm not even sure. Yeah, so yeah, same one on TikTok. And then in terms of website, you can always find me at it's arnutrition.net. And that's the website as well. So yeah, those are probably the two easiest ways to find me.
Well, dude, I appreciate you ripping this with us. I got a bunch of AI notes over here to review after this. So this was dope. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm a Fathom user as well. Big fan of Fathom.
Yeah, the real ones know.
Yeah,
Appreciate you guys
but yeah,
listening.
appreciate
Keep
you guys.
chopping wood,
Yeah.
baby. Let's go.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.